Good afternoon, Dr. Jones, coworkers, and friends. I'm Rita Carr. Does it take you all long to get to work each morning? Get stuck much in traffic on 264 and Military Highway? Now, have you ever been mudding or off-roading before? Can you imagine your commute to work, grocery shopping, or back home to visit your folks or in-laws if you were mudding to work in late May when it's been raining for a month and a half? Picture that, and now picture that commute on your bike instead. I'm here today to tell you all about the development of the system of roads in America. Keep that picture in mind of how different your life would be without them, while I tell you about the visionaries and politicians who paved the way for us. I clearly have a lot of time to sit on the roads every day getting here. I feel that learning that the history of something we partake in every day gives me an interesting appreciation for that aspect of my daily life and helps me enjoy its nuances a little bit better. I'd argue there were three main concepts to the development of these roads: businessmen and their capital interests, government research and the burden of financing these interests, and Dwight Eisenhower's Federal Highway Act, which led to the largest highway system in the world. While researching these roads, I read a recent book from 2012 I'd actually recommend if you pick up, if you do enjoy the conversation today, by Earl Swift called The Big Roads. I also watched a 2015 Discovery Channel documentary called Transport Systems in the USA. Wasn't quite as interesting, but if you're really interested in it, you might want to watch it. And I relied on several interesting articles by the Thought Company publication, History of the American Roads and the First Federal Highway by Mary Bellis, and The National Road, America's First Major Highway by Robert McNamara. Both were written in 2017. So while Dwight Eisenhower and Henry Ford are probably the two names you're most likely to think of when I ask for the fathers of the American road, it's actually a man named Carl Fisher, who I believe is much more deserving of the name. To my delight, he's also a fine example of a pull yourself up by the bootstraps nice American hero. Carl Fisher began his career at 12 when he dropped out of school to sell newspapers and random oddities he'd find in a convenience store, and he saved up enough money to begin selling bikes. By 16, he opened up his first bike shop, and then he started selling motorized bikes, and then he started selling cars, and that car room turned into a 3-story car room. And eventually, he hosted the largest automobile race across the country that the world had ever seen until that point. From there, he opened up the first racetrack, which is now the Indianapolis Speedway. But to build that, he realized that he needed to pave roads for both visitors and cars in order to get to the Speedway. And inside the Speedway, he needed to build roads for people to travel around. From this racetrack developed roughly a 350-mile radius highway system around, which was by no means what you'd expect it to be now. It wasn't paved, it was dirt. They were dangerous and lined with small car-sized ditches on the sides, just big enough for a car to fit in and stay in immovably when it was muddy out. From there, he bought a vacation home in the southern region of America and did the same exact thing, built out the road systems and expanded a highway and eventually an interstate system down south, which would eventually come to connect with the central part of America and then the northern part of America. And he continued lobbying for support of the government the entire time. While Henry Ford himself had relatively little to do with the roads forming, he did pioneer a mass-produced car that was cheap enough to distribute to the middle class. Carl Fisher frequently wrote letters with Henry Ford, asking him and communicating with him about plans for a transcontinental road system, but Ford had little interest in participating in funding those roads. He clearly didn't have much trouble selling his cars, whether there were roads or not, to drive them on. Carl Fisher's plans did continue, and he made progress with other innovators and leaders without Henry Ford's help. The early 20th century saw a lot of increased productivity and actually a population shift from rural areas into cities, which led to, obviously, overpopulation in urban areas. So in 1917, Manhattan began its first commuter rail going to Queens. I have a picture of it up here. It was actually termed as the road to nowhere. Everybody doubted that it would ever become anything. But the people in overcrowded American cities wanted more space. There was clearly a market for these roads. These railway systems started popping up in major American cities all over and began a method of tolls to pay for maintenance and growth of the systems that's still relied on today. So now we have this where you pay to get onto the train, and that's actually the same train as that. So now the first roads in America were created by famous old folks like Daniel Boone, funded by land speculators. But even back then, the American government knew that they couldn't always count on entrepreneurs to create the infrastructure that we need to build our country. And although, as we've seen, they did that still for more than a century after Daniel Boone, In the beginning, it really was the desire for expansion and wealth that pushed the creation of these first national roads to reach out west, to bring explorers. These roads were created for wagons, though, rather than bikes, so they were a lot wider and they were sturdier, and a lot of them are still there today. Traditionally, the roads were maintained by the local landowners, but with increased bike traffic, this was seeming less and less sustainable by the end of the 19th century. The Department of Agriculture eventually formed an Office of Road Inquiry, which was created to inquire about the development and research of more roads and the technology we need to make it. It was initially funded with only $10,000 for the entire country, and didn't get too much done outside of just researching what a system might look like in the future. By the time Henry Ford's cars were taking up road space, that ORI, the Office of Research of Road Inquiry, transformed into the Bureau of Public Roads. This bureau helped get real roads created and worked with existing road systems that had been put in place by investors like Carl Fisher. They funded these roads by taxing things like fuel and motor cars when they were sold, and by registration fees when you registered your car, the same way we do at the Department of Transportation now. And some money was actually funded by local and federal governments. So in 1919, Thomas Harris McDonald enters the scene. He was truly one of the greatest minds on this road to modern transit. His greatest service, I'd say, was convincing the powers that be that roads were of great importance to the success and wealth of this country. He really sold the road system throughout his career. He had an overwhelming presence that actually stunned people when he walked into the room. He would travel to cities to check out the roads all around, and he would always wear a suit, a full suit, even in the hottest, muggiest weather. He was actually often at odds with the president that he served under. It was first Franklin Roosevelt and then Eisenhower, which eventually led to his political career ending. But it was not before he had left a long-standing impression on Eisenhower. The Great Depression era, although awful for Americans, was extremely beneficial in the creation of roads because of the increased availability of labor and public works projects. So Roosevelt's administration, as you know, with the public works projects from the New Deal, he had employed thousands of otherwise out-of-work men to create roads connecting existing major road systems, bridges, and the network of national parks that were being created. And they had roads inside them, obviously. By the time 1956 came around and President Eisenhower was urging Congress to pass legislation for an entire highway system, Americans were traveling on roads 30% more than they were at the beginning of the decade. It seemingly only took Eisenhower's administration getting truckers onto their side to wager Congress's approval as well. In Congress, a senior senator referred to the German Autobahn to make a really harsh comparison against America's lacking road systems. As you may recall, this is the famous highway system that doesn't have any speed limit in Germany. They discussed the dangers that our current road system lacked from our technology that was pretty crappy at the time. One highway out of DC was actually nicknamed Suicide Highway at this point. They slapped together a fine plan for surmounting obstacles in financing the project and passed a bill that was pretty far away from Eisenhower's original dream, but regardless, was a success in most measures, and Eisenhower was eventually credited with the entire thing. The modern highway systems, beside connecting major destinations, offered two big advancements for passengers. First, they paved roads instead of dirt and muddy roads. Second, they introduced a lot of new technology to roads that improve safety and traffic. One of them is cloverleaf systems, which, as you know, you can get off the highway and take a left turn without having to cross the highway, which is why people don't die as frequently on the highway anymore. The planned highway system was finally finished in 1992. By the time it was finished, a lot of the roads were already in despair. Though there is no intention of reviving the same act, it has set a precedent for continuing to fund maintenance and upgrades to roads. Technology is growing with the roads to continue improving safety and traffic flow, and new road designs and sustainability with new building materials and methods that they're using, like asphalt that they're recycling now. Are there any questions? Anybody have any questions about the modern wonders of the road system in America?
It's very important.
Great.
I like turtles.
Excellent. Well, in conclusion, I hope you're as intrigued as I am about the modern highway system. It is truly a marvel of American capitalism and the leading entrepreneurs at its best, partnered with a government guidance led along by great legislation and innovation. Thank you.
I am Groot.